Will the senator yield for a question?
Yes, I will yield for a question while retaining the floor.
Thank you, Senator Booker, and thank you for coming to the floor tonight and speaking up. I have a few questions for you, so why don't you catch your breath? I wanted to start by saying how proud I am of you to represent our great state of New Jersey alongside each other. And it's not just me. I want to tell you, because I know you've been here in this chamber nonstop for hours, but I want to tell you that the people are paying attention. And they join me in thanking you in this moment. In fact, I saw a few posts I thought I'd share. Stacy from Bayonne said on Facebook, "I couldn't be prouder to be a lifelong New Jerseyan than I am tonight. Keep it up. Get in that good trouble. Lead the way, and hopefully others will follow." Janie in Princeton said, "Thank you. Proud that you are my senator and that you are bringing big Jersey energy to D.C. tonight." Vicky in Ewing said, "We are sending our strength to you. Medicare and Medicaid should not be touched." And someone on Reddit even said, "I hope he wore the most comfortable and supportive shoes he could find." In your opening, you said something that resonated with me. You said, quote, "Our constituents are asking us to acknowledge that this is not normal, that this is a crisis." I can't tell you how important it is to internalize it. That's why we're here at this late hour in the U.S. Senate. That's why you are leading here to make the case to the American people that this is a crisis. That resonated with me because I hear this over and over again. I hear it from people all over our home state, whether at town halls or other rooms that are packed, people saying this moment is not normal, this moment constitutes a crisis. And I'm glad you're speaking on the floor and said that, because what you've said isn't just Cory Booker saying that, it's that millions of New Jerseyans that we represent are saying it. And you are lifting up their voice. It's not just you're saying that, it's that millions of Americans who see something fundamentally wrong and they're angry about it. Now, I have some questions for my colleagues, but I want to add some context for this, because I want to dig in a bit on why people are so angry in this moment and why what we're seeing from Donald Trump and Elon Musk isn't in response to that anger, it is the cause of it. A common refrain in the town halls that I've held is that people just feel like nothing is working for them. There is a promise, a uniquely American promise, that is simply going unfulfilled for too many. Now, that promise is simple. Your government will work for you. Your economy will allow you to advance if you work hard and give your kids a better future. And your country will keep you safe by ensuring the world is stable and secure. And Senator, you and I are here because we know that this promise is going unfulfilled. To say that the American promise is going unfulfilled would be a tragedy in its own right. It would be something that we as a Congress should put our entire focus into restoring. But the sad fact is that this isn't just about a promise unfulfilled. It's about a promise that has been hijacked. It's about a promise that has been distorted to work for those who have been paid to play, to be denied for everyone else. Now, let's start with the promise that your government will work for you. This is the basis of our democratic republic. We are public servants in that we serve the people. It's the people's priorities that we put first. It is their lives that we work to make better every day. It is their futures that we are endeavoring to brighten. But when the people look at Donald Trump and his administration, they don't see that. They see Elon Musk, who donated nearly $300 million to buy his way into a seat of power. And the world's richest man has been handed the keys to our government, and the same person who has been handed nearly $40 billion in your taxpayer dollars to prop up his own corporations is now working to fire veterans from their jobs, make the Social Security Administration less responsive to seniors, and make it harder for your government to work for you. Now, that's what we've seen in the collection of billionaires that buy their way into fulfilling their own American promise, a government that works for them and only them, a government that keeps them rich at any cost, from your Medicaid to your Social Security to the food you put on the table, a government where they pay and they benefit, and if you can't, you're left behind. That's not the government our parents were promised. That's not the government we were promised. That's not the government we want to pass down to our kids. As Senator Booker mentioned, our nation is in crisis. Bedrock commitments are being broken. That starts with the first American promise. We can rebuild and restore that promise by actually working to make our government work for the people. Where we see corruption, we must call it out and combat it. And the corrupting power of money in our politics is one example, and the extreme wealth of billionaires like Elon Musk are drowning out working Americans, and that must be addressed. And as we approach the 250th anniversary of our independence of our country, we have an opportunity to remind people that the promise of America is something bigger than ourselves. And that public service, not private enrichment for those at the very top, but that public service is core to what makes this country special. So let's talk about that second American promise. This is the promise of the American dream. That Rockwellian notion of the house and the white picket fence and the kids in the yard only works if you can pay for that house. It only works if you can afford childcare and health care for those kids. It only works if you can work hard and deliver something bigger and better than you were handed. And right now, that is not happening. While we are fighting to bring change to our economy to make life more affordable and the middle class more accessible, what we're seeing from Donald Trump and Elon Musk is another promise hijacked for those at the very top. Senator Booker, I want to just take a step back as I get into these questions here, because you're talking about Social Security, talking about Medicaid, talking about so many of these other issues here. But in that broader context, let's situate it here, which is this recognition that we live in the time of the greatest amount of inequality in our nation's history. So it isn't just about these programs and how we rely on them. It's that we are seeing the wealth gap widening, and it's happening faster and faster. And in many ways, I consider this to be the great fragility of America right now. That we are the greatest, richest, most powerful country in the world, but not for everybody. And what we see right now is it's not just about the Social Security, it's not just about the checks, but as you mentioned, Social Security offices are closing. Worry about customer service if people call on the phone lines. And it feels like efforts are underway to try to sabotage our Social Security, our Medicare, our Medicaid, and then have people say, hey, look, it's not working. And that's why we need to get rid of these things. And that sabotage is something people see right before their very eyes. I mean, you heard the Commerce Secretary talk about how, seniors won't mind if there are late payments, and he said that those that complain are fraudsters, as you mentioned. That's directly trying to undermine people who are working hard over the course of their lives. And I have to say, it's a great irony in many ways, this idea that the richest man in the world is, criticizing the hard-earned savings of seniors that are just getting, a little bit every single month for them to just try to get by, and then he calls it a Ponzi scheme. And my father, as you mentioned, is one of those that depends on Social Security for his entire livelihood right now. And I heard, another person at a town hall I did, she described the feeling that she has right now, and I think you can connect with it. She said it feels hard to breathe right now because there's so much anxiety in the American people. So I'm glad that you're shining a light on this, because people are scared and they're worried and they want to know what comes next. So my question to you here is something that was actually shared by a constituent of both of ours, talking about all the concerns of Social Security of this time. But I thought it was very poignant in pointing out that What we also need to put forward to the American people right now is a vision going forward of how to not just restore and protect this promise, but how we take it to the next step. If we live in the time of the greatest amount of inequality, not just to think about how we hold on to a receding tide, but how to try to put forward some vision that can try to inspire in the same way that Social Security did and put forward generational change. So I wanted to ask you that sense. Do you believe in that sense that right now, more than ever, as people are faced with this anxiety that's hard to breathe, that yes, we'll stand here on the floor of the Senate and do everything we humanly can to be able to protect what they have? But do you agree that we also have to put forward that positive vision of where we take Social Security, where do we take Medicaid, Medicare, where do we take our economy to better work for everybody, so we're not just trying to figure out how to better divide and hold on to the pennies that the billionaires are willing to share with the rest of us while they don't give us anything else to be able to move forward on? And how do we come up with a vision that tries to shrink that inequality and live in a society that's willing to share that wealth and recognize there's more than enough to go around? And that's not zero sum. And that we can be stronger together in that way. And I'd love to hear how you can paint that vision for the American people.
So I will answer your question, but knowing that my mom's watching right now, I want to, before I answer the question, I just want to tell folks who may not know about my relationship with my other senator from New Jersey. It is probably one of the more interesting relationships in here. I always tell New Jerseyans I voted for Andy Kim before anybody else did, because I was on an interview committee for the Rhodes Scholarship in New Jersey. And I was a former Rhodes, and I really wanted the experience of what it was like to be on the other side, because my experience was quite interesting. And these incredible folks came in, and young people from New Jersey were amazing, applying for this extremely competitive scholarship. And Andy Kim was one among that number, and he blew the committee away. So way back, I'm going to retain the floor, but ask you a question. What year was that?
That would have been 2004.
2004.
21 years ago.
How many years?
21 years.
21 years ago. In 2002, I had lost a run for mayor, and 2006 I run again, so I was sort of in between trying to do my work in Newark, and he blew me away. And I knew then that he was this extraordinary man of character and brilliance, this great mix of heart and head, this great mix of honor, and a fierce ambition to make a contribution to the world. And if you follow Andy's career, he has been a public servant in some of the highest levels in the administration. But then he ran for Congress, and I remember that race, and you electrified not just the district you represented, but really the whole state of New Jersey. And then he came here. But the moment that I remember most was during the January 6th attack. I was here on the Senate floor in this very seat, and will never forget how back here, Mark Kelly, an unbelievable senator who, he and I were two of the last people off the floor, along with one of our Republican colleagues, just trying to make sure if anybody broke through, we would be there. I couldn't believe that I was a senator. I was thinking about having to fight my way off the Senate floor. But I remember that we got to an undisclosed location, and then a lot of senators were in safe spots, and a lot of House members were safe spots, debating about what to do. I'm so happy we came back late and continued the business of the government, the transfer of power. But while all these senators were dealing with the big issues and whatever, Andy Kim took a broom, plastic bags, and just began cleaning up under the Capitol dome. Remarkable humility shown in a humble gesture about his love of country. And now here we stand on the Senate floor, the earliest hours of the morning, closing in on 2 a.m., and you asked me this question that I didn't expect, which is, hey, Cory, this now seems to be a time where Democrats are defining themselves about what they're against. Shouldn't we be talking about a vision of what we're for? I am very upset watching what's happening to Social Security. watching what's happening to insinuate fear among seniors who should be retiring with security and peace, cuts and undermining, thousands of people being laid off, all of that is worthy of us standing in the things we're reading. But what I think Senator Kim is really pointing to the fact is that there is bold visions for who we're going to be as a country. He is one of these big believers that we can be a nation that boasts about we are a country where somebody doesn't retire and lives on such a meager check that they're technically at the poverty line. Like Senator Booker, we have more wealth than nations all around the globe, stratospheric wealth in this country, GDP growth. And can't we design a system that doesn't have seniors stressed out and living, those that live off of their paychecks, living there? And the other thing I know you know about, and I just recently did a talk with a Republican friend of mine, Senator Young. We worked on a bill together because we both recognize we're with seniors, that generation, baby boomers, a generation ahead of me. I was about to say ahead of us, but you're technically a millennial. You're a millennial, I'm an Xer. But the generation ahead of me is so big that we're seeing this massive group of Americans soon to be retiring, and lots of people recognize they're calling it the Great Retirement Crisis. Not because Social Security checks won't be there. You're asking me, Cory, what's the great vision for they're going to be there? But because just the reality of that the Social Security checks themselves are so meager. And many other people don't have jobs where they have 401ks and the like. And so Senator Young, again, this is not a partisan speech. Later I'll be quoting from the Cato Institute, the Wall Street Journal editor, lots of conservatives who point to this not being a normal time in America, this being a crisis moment in America, not just people on my side of the aisle, but Republican governors, Republican thought leaders. A lot of folks are saying that there's a real crisis in our country being caused by the current president who in 71 days, most people can't say yes, most people say no to the question, are you better off than you were 71 days ago? And so I want to answer your question by saying this. Everyone should retire with a secure Social Security. I believe there's ways to secure the programs by asking the wealthiest people who pay the smallest percentage of their income into Social Security, while people like the names I'm reading are often paying the most. By the wealthiest people paying a little bit more in Social Security taxes on their income, minuscule, that, as you said, with the gravity of the wealth that's being created in this country, which is, again, something that I'm not against, in terms of just people being successful, but this idea that we have a system that creates a fair, secure retirement, that's one thing that we can do. I think also one of these things that we should be talking about right now is how do we make the Social Security system not frustrating for people who complained before Donald Trump laid off tens of thousands of people with Musk, who complained about wait times and other things. There's ways we can improve Social Security services as well. So I think we can do things to secure Social Security in the long term with a simple fix, not by raising the retirement age for people who are struggling, but by doing things by simply saying, you know what, Social Security taxes already are regressive because they cap out at a certain amount. Maybe skip some of the people in the middle under $400,000 or $500,000 a year, make people who are the wealthiest in our country pay a little bit more. That would be my vision. A very small amount would create a secure system. I think we can also do a lot to improve the Social Security services. And then what I did with Senator Young, this is what's special about this place when it happens, is for people to reimagine what economic security could be about. I'm now very quietly, I think I've told you about this, have this great idea that I've been talking about for years called baby bonds, or that every child born in America, and this is not a new idea. We actually scraped it from people years and years ago on both sides of the aisle in here, had this idea that why not in a capitalist society that every child be born with a savings account, a growth account, that government sees it with some money and their entire lives, people can contribute into that tax-free and it can grow. And so that by the time, not retirement, by the time they're 20, 25, 30, they have thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars to invest in things that create wealth, because right now, lots of people are working paycheck to paycheck and don't have stock accounts, don't have the kind of things that could actually produce a lot more wealth. I'm just throwing that out as one idea, Andy, and I'm going to pause because I know you have another question, and I'm going to yield to the question while retaining the floor. But I just want to say There are so many bipartisan ideas to deal with wealth inequality. I mean, the child tax credit that was unfortunately not made permanent cut child poverty in America in half. It worked for an entire year. And I remember some of my colleagues, from Marco Rubio to Mitt Romney, talking about, hey, we should be expanding the child tax credit. We should be having a bolder vision for American retirement security, for wealth creation, for economic security, but we're not talking about those bold ideas. We have a president who's come in, and one of the first things he's done in 71 days is insinuate fear and insecurity about Social Security by threatening it, by telling lies about it, and by having somebody like Elon Musk calling it a Ponzi scheme, and that's why we get fear. And then they take a hatchet to the actual agency that undermines its ability to deliver service in a good way.
Will the senator yield?
I will yield for a question while retaining the floor.
Yeah. What you raised is absolutely right, and it's front and center in everyone's minds. When my parents immigrated here 50 years ago, they didn't know anybody in the entire Western Hemisphere of planet Earth. But America, it called them, it inspired them, and I asked them once, like, what was it that drew you here? And they said that they felt that here in America, they could guarantee that the family that they raised, that their kids, me and my sister, would have a better life and more opportunities than they did. And that was that sense, that generational progress that is made. But now, I'm standing here with a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old. I'm hoping fast asleep right now. And I don't know if I can make that same promise to them right now, that I could guarantee them that they will have a better life and more opportunities. So, there is that growing cynicism and pessimism about that American promise I talked to you about. And I just feel like there's an unraveling happening here, where we see this sense of concern, and it's being weaponized by some to create that sense of zero sum, to push us away from this idea that we're part of something bigger than all of us and that we can all lift each other up in that great American project. And it's sad, because as we're getting to that 250th anniversary, it should be a time when we rededicate ourselves to the American project, right? Like recommit ourselves to what the next 250 years would be. But we're entering it now with this sense of pessimism on that front. So, I guess my question to you here is, how do we break out of that tailspin on that front?
So, and you got me really excited. You see me sort of pacing back here, because I love that you're a millennial. I'm an X generation. I love the baby boomers, but they're quickly leaving Congress. This is the last baby boomer president we will ever have. I'm confident of that. And the new generations are coming forward to lead in America, and it is time that we dream America anew. It really is. It is time that we revive and redeem the dream. I just am one of these people that thinks, like, okay, guys, we have some of the brightest minds on the planet Earth. Some of our founding fathers said we need a little revolution every once in a while. Like, we need new thoughts and new ideas and new visions that excite and energize people, that take a lot of the old divisions in our country and erase them and remind people we have common cause and common purpose. And I want to get people excited again about the American dream. I want to renew the dream, redeem the dream. We can do that. I'm so excited about it. And financial security, it is absurd that we don't have the greatest plan to create wealth, not for the favored few simply. Again, the top quartile in America has crushed it the last 25 years. Heck, under Obama alone, the stock market doubled, but most Americans don't own stocks. So people who are sitting on passive wealth were able to grow and grow and grow and grow, while working Americans saw their prices going up, housing becoming unaffordable, and the idea of the American dream under assault. And it ticks me off that other countries are trying to out-America us. They're trying to take our secret sauce that we seem to be turning our back on. Affordable higher education, apprenticeship programs. I mean, some of our European competitors, job disappears at 40, you can go right into an apprenticeship program where you can earn and learn and end up in a career that gives you not just success, but you thrive in. There is no idea that we can't conceive as a country. This is an idea and a time that I just think that we need to start being bold again in our visions for collective prosperity, for everyone to thrive, not just the favored few, but the many. And I'm telling you, those ideas are out there, whether it's baby bonds, a child tax credit, investing in science and research. There's so many things. But can I say this to you affectionately? You are a nerd, as am I. We're two guys that love to read, that love American history. We're two guys that this body, go back a century, they never imagined that we'd be here, okay? And one of my favorite speeches of all time was when Daniel Webster got on Bunker Hill. He delivered the speech, I'm going to read the introduction to it, to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Revolutionary War battle at Bunker Hill, in which the outnumbered colonists inflicted such heavy losses on the mighty British forces attempting to evade. I love one of the quotes, I can't remember it exactly, but the general, the person that was leading the British attack, wrote in their diary or wrote back to the king, "We won the battle, but a few more victories like this, we're going to lose the continent." That's how great these people were. And this is what I want you to know. It's a new generation, right? Those leaders are no longer around. I read this and I get excited about the possibilities for our generation, the new leaders that are emerging in America that have to. It is their obligation not to let the dream die, to redeem the dream. And so here it is. I'm just dying to read this to you. Here it is, Andy. I don't want to read too much of it to you. Okay. Here we go. If in our case, the representative system is ultimately to fail, this idea of a democratic government, popular governments must be pronounced impossible. He's saying that we have the obligation to make a more perfect union. No combination of circumstances more favorable to this experiment can ever be expected to occur. The last hopes of mankind, therefore, rest with us. Can we make this democratic experiment work? And it should be proclaimed that our example had become an argument for the experiment. The principle of free government adheres to this American soil. It is bedded in this soil. It's as immovable as this nation's mountains. And let the sacred obligations, this is the part, Andy, Senator Kim, and let the sacred obligations which have devolved on us, this generation, and on us, sink into our hearts. The sacred obligations. Those are daily dropping from among us, who established our liberty and our government. The generation that established this nation are now dying. The great trust now descends to our hands. Let us apply ourselves to which is presented to us as appropriate object. We can win no laurels in our generation in a war for independence. Earlier and worthier hands gathered all of those laurels. Nor are there places for us by the side of Solon and Alfred and other founders of our state. Our fathers have filled them. But there remains to us a great duty of defense and preservation, and there is open to us also the noble pursuit to which the spirit of the times strongly invites us. Our proper business is improvement. Let ours be the age of improvement. In a day of peace, let us advance the arts of peace and the works of peace. Let us develop the resources of our lands, call forth its powers, build up its institutions, promote all its greatness, and see whether we also in our day and generation may not perform something worthy to be remembered. Let us cultivate a true spirit of union and harmony. In pursuing the great objects which our condition points out to us, let us act under a settled conviction and an habitual feeling that these 24 states are one country. Let our conceptions be enlarged to the circle of our duties. Let us extend our ideas over the whole and vast field in which we are called to act. Let our object be our country, our whole country. And by the blessings of God, may that country itself become a vast and splendid monument, not of oppression and terror, but of wisdom, peace, and liberty, upon which the world may gaze with admiration forever. That's a bold vision. This bold vision that doesn't give up on America, doesn't surrender to cynicism about America. That's who you are, Andy Kim, and that's what gets me excited. Right now, we're fighting against what I think are tyrannical forces. I'm sorry that when a leader stands up, not with humility like George Washington's farewell address or some of the great founders in their inaugural addresses, but stands up and says, only I can solve these problems, who doesn't use his speeches to heal and to comfort, but to talk about the enemies he's going to pursue. And those enemies are not the adversaries who seek to destroy us. Those enemies are other Americans. And to create an environment where our seniors who should be retiring in security are fearful that their Social Security or their Medicaid or their Medicare is going to be under threat, that's insidious to me. This is an unnormal time. This is why I'm standing here. But you, my friend, my partner in the Senate, God, this partnership, I am so excited about the future. I'm so excited about the promise. Let us fend off all attempts to cut Social Security and Social Security services. Let us fend off all attempts to cut Medicaid and Medicaid care and CHIPS and all the other things that we rely on. But let us also not forget that our obligation is not to defend what it is, but to have a vision for what can become. We now, when so many people are giving up on the American dream, on the idea of America, on what you said so wonderfully, that my children will do better than me, that basic bedrock that our children, generation after generation, will do better and better and better. It's time to redeem the dream and dream America anew with bold visions, not how we will just help people survive in retirement, but visions of how we all can thrive in this great nation that has enough resource and enough abundance to provide for everyone's hopes and dreams.
Keep up your energy. I yield back.
Thank you. You're giving me energy. I'm sourcing myself from you. Now, I don't want to just cast aspersions on, and we're saying things that I just want to back up in fact. All those letters from seniors. I see my dear friend from Pennsylvania is now the presiding officer. You missed all the letters I read from Pennsylvania. All those letters where people were using the word Ponzi scheme, where did that come from? I just want to read. The Joe Rogan Experience. I actually like and enjoy listening to Joe Rogan. Elon, Social Security is the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time. Now that's a big statement. The biggest Ponzi scheme of all time, Elon says. And Joe Rogan says, why? Explain that. Oh, Elon says, so, well, people pay into Social Security, and the money goes out of Social Security immediately, but the obligation for Social Security is your entire retirement career. So you're paying with your, and I'm reading this verbatim, you're paying with the kind of people you're paying, like if you look at the future obligations of Social Security, it far exceeds the tax revenue far. If you've looked at the debt clock, Rogan says, yes. Okay, there's 3 there's, I'm reading it verbatim, our present day debt, but then there's our future obligations. So when you look at the future obligations of Social Security, the actual national debt is like double what people think it is because of the future obligations. Rogan, Elon. So basically people are living way longer than expected. That was the evidence of a Ponzi scheme. Now let's correct something. The reason why we have a massive debt in America, lots of people should take ownership over it, but the biggest debt creator in the last, say, 25, 30 years is the President of the United States, current one, in his first term by blowing massive holes in our deficits to give tax cuts that went way disproportionately to the wealthiest Americans and corporations. And he wants to renew those tax cuts that independent budget folks are saying could add trillions of dollars to our national deficit. So if he's talking about the debt clock or whatever he was talking about, he is a part of an administration, even though he's unelected and not approved by Congress and whatever. He and his president, the richest man in the world and the most powerful man in the world together, they're driving an agenda that's going to drive this deficit much bigger. And they're going to try to pay for some of it, not all of it, because it's trillions of dollars of projected debt. They're going to try to pay for some of it by cutting NIH grants, by cutting Medicaid, by cutting staff at Social Security. So no, Social Security is not a Ponzi scheme. People paid into it. And as Andy Kim and I just talked, there are ways to preserve it, strengthen it, make it better. It's a program that pays benefits after a lifetime of work. It's never missed a payment. It's never run out of money. It's an insurance program, but don't take my word for it. Here is Current Affairs magazine editor Nathan Robinson writing on March 7th, "Why Social Security is not a Ponzi scheme." That's a great title. Old age insurance is not a scam, and it's not destined to collapse. Proponents of privatizing or limiting Social Security are constantly telling lies about it. So here's the article. Elon Musk has called Social Security a Ponzi scheme, comparing it to a scam in which a con man must keep finding new suckers in order to disguise the financial unsustainability of the enterprise. The term has also been used by libertarian commentators as reasons and the Hoover Institute, who try to convince people that the program is fundamentally broken and unsustainable, because both Social Security and Ponzi schemes take money in the form of new contributions, which they pay to old ones. It is easy to craft a superficial resemblance between the two, but Social Security is not a Ponzi scheme, and it's important to understand why. Because a comparison is used to generate the illusion of Social Security crisis that can be used to justify major benefit cuts or even the elimination of the program altogether. Under the Ponzi scheme differences between old age insurance and Ponzi schemes, we can train ourselves mentally to resist the propaganda that is used to try to convince the public to support undermining one of our most important social welfare programs. Let's think about a few different cases in which money is pooled and paid out. First, let's imagine a company has a pension scheme. I realize this may be difficult to imagine these days, but stick with me for a minute. Workers pay 5% of their income. The employer pays in an equivalent amount to 50% of the worker's income. When the worker is retired, they get a fixed benefit every year for the rest of their life, equivalent to some percentage of what their salary was. Let's call that scenario A. Now let's imagine a different scenario. 5 uncommonly astute middle schoolers create a rudimentary insurance scheme to guard against being punished by their parents. The children all go to the mall every week and play arcade games together. They each get an allowance of $10 a week which they spend at the arcade. What they decide to do is to spend $9 each week instead and put $1 a week into a fund. If one of them has their allowance taken away by their parents, the fund will pay the arcade money for the week. That way, nobody in the friend group is ever deprived of the ability to go to the arcade. We're going to call that scenario B. Finally, let us imagine a scenario in which a fraudster tricks a group of old people into giving them their money. He says that if they invest their retirement money with him, he can guarantee them a 20% year return, risk-free. They invest. He provides them with statements showing that their money indeed is growing at 20% a year. When they ask him to pull a portion of their money out so they can spend it, he disperses it. But what he actually is doing is spending all their money and providing fake statements. He's able to keep paying withdrawals because he's constantly recruiting new suckers, just enough to cover what people are withdrawing. Eventually, people get suspicious. Too many try to withdraw their money at once, and he flees the country. This is a Ponzi scheme named after the Italian con man, Charles Ponzi, who fleeced people in this way. We will call this Ponzi scheme scenario C. Notice that there are similarities and differences between the three scenarios. The similarity is that there is a fund that some people are paying into while others are being paid. Another similarity is that all three are potentially unstable. If in scenario A company pension employee starts living a very long time and in retirement, the amount of money in the pension fund might not be able to cover the promised benefits, necessitating an adjustment of the contributions from the next generation of workers. Or if in scenario B, middle school arcade insurance, one of the kids might be so unruly that his parents are spending his allowance every other week, requiring the adjustments of the rules of the payouts or contributions to keep the fund stable. Scenario C, the Ponzi scheme, is the most unstable of all because it depends on elaborate fraud, on fake accounting that disguises the fact that nobody has the amount of money that they are being told they have. It only lasts until people try to actually use the money, but scenarios A and B could also collapse if they're not managed well. We can see that despite the commonalities, there are fundamental differences between scenarios A, B, and scenario C. The first two are legitimate ways for people to pool and distribute money, and they can work just fine, accomplishing their intended purpose. The third is a fraud in which people's money is being stolen. The difference is more important than the similarities. I have laboriously laid out these examples in hopes that we can better understand why Social Security can be made to look like a Ponzi scheme, but it isn't one at all. Social Security is the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time, said Musk. People pay into Social Security and the money goes out of Social Security immediately, but the obligation for Social Security is your entire retirement career. Now, it's true that in an insurance system, the incoming payments from new people might be used to fund outgoing payments to people who are already part of a Ponzi scheme. But that's not what makes a Ponzi scheme a Ponzi scheme. Musk, not for the first time, doesn't know what he's talking about. One of the reasons Social Security can be made to seem like a Ponzi scheme is because people may misunderstand how it works. People might think that Social Security saves their money over time, and then when they retire, it pays their money back. Not quite how it works. It's not like a savings account. The money I pay in is not saved up for me. It's paid out to today's beneficiaries. When I retire, my benefits will be paid by the incoming next generation of workers. Discovering this fact can make people think that most security is a Ponzi scheme, but it's not. A Ponzi scheme is a fraud in which returns are fake. There is nothing fake about Social Security as long as enough money is in the pool to pay out beneficiaries. The operation is sustainable and perfectly honest. The only reason it matters that retirees do not pay for their own benefits but depend on the payments of the next generation of workers is that if there is a next generation of workers, if there isn't a next generation of workers, we got a problem. But unfortunately, there is every reason to believe that human beings will continue to exist, work, and pay Social Security taxes. Now, what Musk and others who claim Social Security is a scam or in crisis say is that in the future there will be not enough workers to pay retirees the promised benefits. Musk says, and I quote, "If you look at the future obligations of Social Security as far extends the tax revenue, there's our present-day debt, but then there's our future obligations. So when you look at the future obligations of Social Security, the actual national debt is double what people think it is because the future obligations, basically people are living way longer than expected, and there are fewer babies being born, so you have many people who are retired that live for a long time and get retirement payments. However bad the financial situation is right now for the federal government, it will be much worse in the future," end quote. But what he's trying to get you to think this is a major problem or some deep fundamental flaw with Social Security, it isn't. Every insurance plan has to make adjustments over time. If there are a lot of wildfires burning down houses, a company selling fire insurance might have to raise premiums. The increased premiums might be small, but without them, the program would go bankrupt. This doesn't mean, however, that we'd be justified in saying fire insurance plans are a Ponzi scheme destined to go bankrupt. The adjustments needed to be made to Social Security in the long term are minor. Yes, people are living longer and having fewer babies. That means there ultimately has to be some kind of adjustment to either how much is being paid in, how much is being paid out, or both. Republicans want to cut benefits. Defenders of Social Security instead want to raise the money going into it by increasing taxes paid by the wealthy. So interesting that we just saw that in the dialogue with my ideas with Andy Kim. The amount of taxes that would need to be raised in order to make Social Security solvent is negligible. The Social Security Administration has estimated that increased in the combined payroll tax from 12.4% to 14.4% to make the program would make the program sustainable for the next 75 years. As Dean Baker and Mark Westbrot put it in the introduction to 1999's Social Security book entitled "The Phony Crisis," the only real threat to Social Security comes not from any fiscal or demographic constraints, but from the political assaults on the program by would-be reformers. If not for these attacks, the probability that Social Security will not be there when anyone who is alive today retires would be about the same as the odds that the U.S. government will not be there. Of course, in the next 25 years since that was written, the chances that the U.S. government itself may someday not be there could conceivably have gone up. This is a funny author. Musk is certainly trying to make sure that as little of it remains as possible. But the point remains, the theory behind Social Security is sound. It is not like an unsustainable con, although it's also not like a savings account. It can easily be sustained indefinitely with some minor adjustments to ensure that enough money is coming in to keep it going. It is also the case that even the need to keep enough money flowing in is artificial. As Stephanie Kelton explained, the restrictions on Social Security's ability to pay out are created by a legal choice, not an actual financial constraint facing the U.S. government, which could keep paying benefits even when Social Security's funding, quote unquote, runs out if it was authorized by Congress to do so. Beware the rhetoric of those who describe it as in, quote, crisis or being a scam. They either do not understand the fundamentals of how it works, or they have deliberately tried to deceive you. I cannot say for certain whether Musk is knowledgeable enough to understand the basics and is lying, or simply cannot wrap his head around the basic way an old age insurance program works. The author continues, as Alex Larson of Social Security Works explained to me, the right has been trying to destroy Social Security since its inception. This is for a few reasons. First, a lot of vultures stand to benefit from privatization, just as the privatized Medicare Advantage program has enriched insurers like United Health. Second, the right believes that individuals should be responsible for their own fates, has an ideological opposition to government social welfare programs, even if this results in a bunch of old people being poor. They see Social Security as an offensive, big government intrusion into the free market, something that compels people to put money into a retirement program whether they want to or not. The problem is that most of the public doesn't share this hatred for the concept behind Social Security, and the program is overwhelmingly popular on both sides of the political aisle. Because they have failed to win the ideological argument, the right must therefore convince the public of a different argument, that the program is collapsing and doomed and can only be saved through major benefit cuts, which will be stated as a euphemism of raising the retirement age. Hence the propaganda about unsustainability and Ponzi schemes. This can be effective if you don't know much about how Social Security works. It's easy to be convinced that there's something fishy about its payment structure, or that it's heading for some dire financial apocalypse. But this is not the case. Baker and Westbrot are right, that the threats to Social Security come from those who say they're trying to save it from a crisis. We need to have a clear understanding of what's going on so we can fight to save the program that works just fine and can easily be made to continue providing retirement benefits to every subsequent generation of Americans, ideally ensuring that nobody has to endure old age poverty. And so why are they cutting Social Security staff? Thousands of people. Again, I've said this time and time again. I'm standing here because this is not a usual time. I think our country is facing a growing crisis, but I'm quoting so many Republicans because a lot of us who've run stuff know that you don't just fire people and then realize the mistakes you've made and beg them to come back to work. They know that you don't just fire people that do essential functions in a program before you've even done assessments of what your goals and ambitions are for Social Security. It's clear that their goals and ambition is in the best customer service to improve the complaints that I've heard over the years about waits, unreturned calls, challenges at Social Security offices. That's not their ambition. We've missed a big opportunity to come together in this nation and start to really reimagine our government that works for people, that can do big things, that can serve folks, and instead we are trying to demonize people. We're trying to lie about critical programs, call it a Ponzi scheme, make up out of thin air that somehow we're paying thousands of people that are over 150 years old fraudulently. We're better than that. To that point, I just want to again make my facts clear. Here's an Associated Press fact check from the president's speech. Tens of millions of dead people aren't getting Social Security checks despite Trump and Musk's claims. The Trump administration is falsely claiming that tens of millions of dead people over 100 years old are receiving Social Security payments. Over the past few days, President Donald Trump and billionaire advisor Elon Musk have said on social media and in press briefings that people who are 100, 200, or even 300 years old are properly getting benefits. A huge problem, Musk wrote, as his Department of Government Efficiency digs into the federal agencies to root out waste, fraud, to allegedly root out waste, fraud, and abuse. It is true that improper payments have been made, including to some dead people, but the numbers thrown out by Musk and the White House are way overstated and misrepresent Social Security data. Here are the facts. What has the Trump administration said about payments to centenarians? On Tuesday, Trump said in a press briefing in Florida that we have millions and millions of people over 100 years old receiving Social Security benefits. They're obviously fraudulent or incompetent, Trump said. If you take all those millions of people off Social Security, all of a sudden we have a very powerful Social Security with people that are 80, 70, 90, but not 200 years old, President Trump said. He also said that there's one person in the system listed as 360 years old. Last Monday, Musk posted a slew of posts on social media, including maybe Twilight is real and there are a lot of vampires collecting Social Security, and, quote, having tens of millions of people marked in Social Security as alive when they are definitely dead is a huge problem. Obviously, some of these people would have been alive before America existed as a country. Think about that for a second, end quote. On Wednesday, Social Security's new acting commissioner, Lee Dudek, acknowledged recent reporting about the number of people older than 100 who may be receiving social benefits from Social Security. He said, quote, the reported data are people in our records with a Social Security number who do not have a date of death associated with their record. These individuals are not necessarily receiving benefits. Quote, I am confident that with DOJ's help and our commitment of our executive team and workforce that Social Security will continue to deliver for the American people, Dudek said. How big of a problem is Social Security fraud? A July 2024 report from the Social Security's Inspector General states that from fiscal years 2015 through 2022, the agency paid out almost $8.6 trillion in benefits, including $71.8 billion or less than 1% in improper payments. Most of those erroneous payments were overpayments to living people. In addition, in January, the U.S. Treasury clawed back more than $31 million in a variety of federal payments, not just Social Security payments, that improperly went to dead people, a recovery that former Treasury official David Lebrick said was just the tip of the iceberg. The money was reclaimed as part of a 5-month pilot program after Congress gave the Department of Treasury temporary access to the Social Security Administration's full death master file for 3 years as part of the Omnibus Appropriation Bill in 2021. The Social Security Administration maintains the most complete database of individuals who have died, and the file contains more than 142 million records which go back to 1989. Treasury estimated in January that it would recover more than $215 million during its 3-year access period, which runs from December 2023 through 2026. So are tens of millions of people over 100 years old receiving benefits? No. 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 But the letters I read from scared people across the country show what happens when a president lies, when his unelected, biggest campaign contributor, richest man in the world, just continue to make public statements to insinuate fear and doubt and chaos, and then make announcements that they have to take back, that they're going to end call-in service, which so many seniors rely on. Then they create more fear when people see that posted government buildings that are to be sold at auction to the private sector are actually the addresses of their Social Security offices. Why, everywhere I'm going around my state, everywhere I have gone around the country in the last few weeks, and my mom and her mostly Republican senior community are all up in arms and feel this fear, or the people that we read about who write letters about losing sleep, it's because of the chaos, the crass cruelty, the unjustified cuts, and attacks on a program that is the bedrock between security and financial ruin for so many Americans. Here's a Wall Street Journal writing about this, how Trump and Musk are undermining Social Security. Dealing with Social Security, Wall Street Journal writes, is heading from bad to worse. The agency administers benefits is cutting staff and restricting services as part of the Department of Government Efficiency's review. The Wall Street Journal writes, the federal agency that administers Social Security benefits is facing a customer service mess. The Social Security Administration is cutting staff, restricting what recipients can do over the phone, and closing some local field offices that help people in person. The number of retirees claiming benefits has risen in recent years as boomers age. Few federal agencies reach as far into Americans' lives as Social Security, which delivers a monthly check to some 70 million people. Many of those people now fear that the changes, part of President Trump's powerful overhaul of the federal government through the Department of Government Efficiencies, are eroding confidence in the nearly 90-year-old program. The Wall Street Journal continues, agency officials have acknowledged that because of planned reduction in services over the phone, there will be longer wait and processing times. An estimated 75,000 to 85,000 additional visitors a week could show up at local field offices, according to an internal memo sent by Doris Diaz, the acting deputy commissioner for operations. Details of the memo, which were reviewed by the Wall Street Journal, were reported earlier by the Washington Post. This is likely to tax the agency's 800 number, where people typically make appointments for office visits. Already, Social Security recipients have complained about customer service. Holly Lawrence made several unsuccessful attempts to reach a human before she filed her Social Security claim. Holly Lawrence, 64-year-old, made several unsuccessful attempts to reach a human before she filed her Social Security claim online. The Washington, D.C.-based freelance journalist said she called the agency's 800 number several times starting in February. Each time she got an automated voice that warned of a 2-hour wait on the phone. Her calls were disconnected before she could leave a message or request a callback. She gave up trying to reach a customer service agent and created an online account on the agency's website on March 3rd. She had to wait 2 weeks for an account activation code to arrive in the mail before she could submit her claim. She's still waiting for that claim to be reviewed and processed. Lawrence said she has virtually no retirement savings. I'm financially strapped and cannot afford to get a financial advisor. It was important for me to be able to talk to someone at Social Security, she said, adding that she's concerned that the customer service delays she encountered could negatively affect others who don't have the strength to persist. Wall Street Journal continues, Social Security has a reputation as the third rail of American politics, a benefit to which elected officials make cuts at their own risk, risking their reelection. Donald Trump has vowed not to cut benefits, but he and Doge's leader, Elon Musk, have made unfounded claims of widespread fraud in the program. I'm going to repeat that sentence by the Wall Street Journal. He and Doge's leader, Elon Musk, have made unfounded claims of widespread fraud in the program. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said in a recent podcast interview that if Social Security checks were hypothetically delayed, it might catch those guilty of fraud because they would make the loudest noise, screaming, yelling, and complaining. Critics say turmoil at the agency is undermining trust in the safety net programs. They're killing those programs from the inside, said Illinois' Governor Pritzker. The result of which is we don't know what they are doing to tear down the scaffolding that holds Social Security together. Doge has gained access to systems containing personal information, but a federal judge has temporarily blocked those efforts. On Friday, Leland Dudek, acting Social Security Commissioner, threatened to shut down the agency because of the judge's order, but later reversed course. Dudek, the acting commissioner, said the changes are designed to make sure the right payment is to the right person at the right time. It's a common sense measure. Even before Doge's plans went into motion, the agency's customer service operation had shown signs of strain. Roughly 47% of the 250,000 people who call Social Security's 800 number on an average day have gotten through to a representative this year. Only 47% got through to a rep. This is down from nearly 60% in 2024. The average time to wait for a callback is over 2 hours. There has been a steady decline in the agency staff, and Doge plans to cut employment by another 12%. That would bring the total number of employees to about 50,000 from the about 57,000 today and nearly 68,000 in 2010. Customer service has been going downhill for years, said Bill Sweeney, Senior Vice President at AARP. It's going to get worse. Some Social Security Administration changes amounts to cuts in services. Wall Street Journal continues, starting March 31st, people who want to file for retirement, survivor or disability benefits, or change their direct deposit information can no longer complete the process by phone, the agency said Tuesday. Instead, they must do so online or at a field office. The agency said it's stopping phone calls as part of an effort to reduce fraud and strengthen identity proofing procedures. The Social Security Agency has estimated that improper payments represent 0.3% of total benefits. Dudek acknowledged that recent changes, including the shift away from claiming on the phone, are likely to drive up the numbers making appointments at field offices over the next 60 days. He said field employees would be trained over the next 2 weeks to respond to the changes. We're going to adjust our policy and procedures to adapt to the volume, he said. These changes are not intended to hurt our customers. Dudek said in a call Monday with advocates that the phone service policy change and quick timeline were directed by the White House, according to people familiar with the call. Directed by the White House. Kathleen Romig, Director of Social Security and Disability Policy at the Center on Budget and Policies Priorities, says it isn't clear why the agency chose to discontinue identity verification over the phone while allowing it online and in person. She says other advocates say that by discontinuing the phone option, the agency is creating hurdles for those who lack internet service or live far away from the field office. The agency has also largely stopped serving walk-in customers in field offices, said Maria Frisi, Senior Legislative Representative at the nonprofit National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. Most waiting in person must book appointments on the 800 number. In February, 45% of people who schedule a phone or in-person appointment to file a claim got one within 28 days. DOGE plans to close nearly 50 of the agency's approximately 1,200 field offices, according to Social Security Works, although a spokesman for the nonprofit said some of the offices on the list don't seem to exist. The chairman and CEO of Fiserv, Inc. has been picked by Trump to serve as Social Security's commissioner and will appear before the Senate Finance Committee on Tuesday. I mean, this is the Wall Street Journal pointing out utter incompetence. Utter incompetence. And they're rolling back, trying to catch up, but they don't seem to care in the way they're going about this. They're hurting seniors. They're undermining the security of the program. The title of the Wall Street Journal's article is the best. It's taking services, Social Security services are now going from bad to worse under this leadership who promised they were going to serve people. I see the senator standing, and I'll yield for a question while taking the floor if he has one.
Senator Booker, I'm going to pose to you a pretty simple question here, but first let me lay down a little bit of a predicate. We've heard already some talk tonight about this extraordinary statement, but not terribly surprising from the Secretary of Commerce. This is a close friend of the president, somebody who's very close to all the decisions being made in the White House, where he said, that if a Social Security recipient misses their check for a month, then they should not complain. My mother-in-law wouldn't complain. That's easy for him to say. Maybe you wouldn't complain if your son-in-law was a billionaire. You probably are not going to be harmed by missing a Social Security check if you've got a billionaire in the family, but 99.99% of Americans do not have a billionaire that they can get on the phone if they miss a month, and 1 month's Social Security check disappearing is a cataclysm for a lot of families. As I was listening to you, I just did a little bit of, easy back-of-the-napkin math. So the average Social Security check on a monthly basis in this country, is somewhere around $2,000. Obviously, it varies based upon how much money you put in and what your income was, but on average, it's about $2,000. Now, some Americans have supplemental retirement income, but fewer and fewer do today because it's just not the case any longer that employers are going to provide for you a defined benefit plan. So if you were working minimum wage your entire life, or if you were working a low-wage job, you're not going to have money to put away in Social Security. I remember during one of my walks across the state of Connecticut, spending about a half an hour walking with an elderly gentleman in Willimantic, Connecticut. And, he told me, a story that is not atypical. He worked his entire life, most of his adult life, he worked for Walmart. He was really proud of working for Walmart. He helped a whole bunch of people in his community. He was working for a great American company, a company he was proud of. He was helping people every single day that lived in his neighborhood get what they needed when they came into the store. But the wage he was making at Walmart. He was making very little, and they didn't have any defined benefit plan. They would, let him save a little bit of money if he could find the means, but he couldn't, because every single dime that he made from Walmart had to go to rent and groceries and medicine and cell phone bill and transportation. And so he worked for 20 years at Walmart, and when he retired, you know how much he had in savings? Zero. And he felt like he had done everything people had asked him for. He worked for a great American company. He helped people. He worked full time. He didn't miss time. He didn't goof around. And when he retired, he had nothing saved. So the Social Security check, which to him was probably about $2,000 a month, was everything he had. And he's walking with me, explaining to me what his life is like today. He was coming out of the liquor store, and that was one of the things he did every day, was go down to the liquor store and, buy a nip or two and, just pass a couple hours. He didn't like to spend a lot of time in his house because he has roommates. He lives in a small apartment with two other guys, strangers. He doesn't know them. And he says to me as we're walking, this is not how I expected my life to go. I thought if I worked my entire life and I played by the rules and I worked hard, I'd have a little bit more dignified retirement than this. I share a room with two other guys that I don't know. And that's the reality for a lot of Americans. That's the reality for a lot of retirees. $2,000 is the average Social Security check. I don't know why I picked Tallahassee, but I just picked Tallahassee. I said, what's the average one-bedroom rent in Tallahassee? It's $1,200. Utilities, probably another couple $100. The average senior citizen spends about $500 a month on food. Rent, utilities, food, that's it. That's your $2,000. You got nothing left. If you are one of the 7 million Americans who rely only on Social Security, like my friend from Willimantic, you got nothing left for medicine, for transportation. You have nothing left for a cell phone. You have nothing left to go to the movies once a month. You have nothing left for presents for your grandkids for Christmas or for their birthday. If you're relying on Social Security, and many people who work their entire life are, you go without that check for 1 month, your whole life falls apart. And so this just cavalierness that Musk and Trump have about Social Security, that the billionaires that advise them have about Social Security, don't worry about it if you miss a check for a month or 2 months. You're a fraudster. You're trying to defraud the government. If you complain about missing a Social Security check, it is so disconnected from reality. I know we're going to talk later today about the plans to shut down the Department of Education. It shows this similar disdain for public education, the way that they are showing a disdain for working Americans who are relying on Social Security as their primary means of retirement income, the disdain for the 40 million working Americans who rely on Medicaid. And it's not hard to understand why, because if you're a billionaire, if you're Elon Musk, if you're Donald Trump, You don't have to rely on the public school system. Your kids go to fancy private schools. You will never need to rely on Medicaid. You have lived fortunate lives. In Donald Trump's case, because he was born into wealth. You'll get a Social Security check, but that's not going to be your primary retirement. And so you can understand if you put a bunch of billionaires in charge of the government who don't lead lives that are remotely connected to how average people live, they will say things like Social Security is just some big Ponzi scheme, and that's the big one to eliminate. Or, you know what, America will be all right if we impose $880 billion of cuts to the insurance program for 24% of Americans. Or let's shut down the Department of Education because, I don't know, public education doesn't matter to me. So I think it's just the reality that we're living in today, in which we have people who are making these decisions who just don't understand how normal people's lives work, and in particular, how a person's life falls apart if they have any diminution in their Social Security income when the average check is $2,000 a month and the average expenses in most cities for a senior citizen who relies on Social Security is going to be far higher than $2,000 a month. Here's my question for you. You laid out what's going on in Social Security today. It's like the opposite of efficiency. Right? It's called the Department of Government Efficiency. And like what we know for certain in the Social Security system is that everything they're doing has the intent of making the system less efficient, right? You don't just close dozens of offices and shut down the phone system to make the system more efficient. You do that to make the system less efficient. And so I'm trying to figure out why, right? I'm trying to figure out why. And I'll give you, two theories and then let you tell me if you think I'm right or I'm wrong. It could be a pretext to eradicate the whole system. What did they say about USAID? They said that USAID was a corrupt enterprise. It was corrupt. No evidence of corruption in USAID. No evidence of corruption, no allegations of specific corruptions, but they just made these accusations that USAID was criminal. Musk and Trump said this. It's a criminal enterprise. It's a corrupt enterprise. And that became their justification to eliminate it. Within weeks, USAID, one of the most important vehicles of U.S. national security, was gone. Was gone. They didn't run on that. Nobody saw that coming. It was 2 weeks of allegations about criminality and corruption, and then USAID vanished. And people were like looking around, what happened? They didn't tell us they were going to do that, and now it's gone. They certainly didn't run on eliminating Social Security or cutting people's benefits. But boy, the playbook seems a little familiar here, that all of a sudden there are these lies being told. Let's say what it is about the corruption inside Social Security. As you said, the improper benefit payments are minuscule, right? 0.3% of overall payments. And so is this a pretext to ultimately make big cuts in Social Security? Or alternatively, is it just part of a plan to just sort of put the entire country on edge, right? To just make everybody wake up in the morning wondering whether they're next, right? Is it my Medicaid benefit that's going to be cut? Is Social Security going to be there for me if I'm a federal employee? Is my job here next week? And is that a means of distracting you from the corruption and the thievery that's happening at the highest levels of government? Is that in service of an agenda to try to convert this country from democracy to something else? If everybody is just so focused on the next hit, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, my son losing his federal job, is that a means to ultimately try to drive an agenda through the back door while people are looking at the threats coming at them through the front door. It's clearly not about efficiency. I mean, that's what we know. The changes they're making to Social Security are not about efficiency. So the question is, what's the agenda here if it's not efficiency?
You and I, a presiding officer, there's a lot of people here I know that operate from just a place of like just decency. Like there are problems with government, we need to fix them. We need to make government more efficiency. We need to deal with the national debt. There's so many things that people on the right and the left in this country can agree on. You and I could agree that, God bless America, government can be a lot more efficient. But the question is they're not playing on the level. There are lies about USAID, like, I don't know, 5 million condoms going to Gaza or something outrageous and easily proven false time and time again. The President of the United States, again, this doesn't shock people anymore. He's a president more than any other modern president by independent fact checkers has proven to lie over and over again. But as I sat there listening to his speech, and he just goes on and on about transgender mice when that was proven to be utterly a lie. Or else somebody just misreading the kind of mice that are used in medical experiments, which have a similar word. So are they lying in order to attack these programs? DOGE is insidious in the fact that they keep posting things and then having to pull them down because just independent folks. And I have article after article. We're so far behind in this agenda of things to get through. I'm not going to read them all. Some of them I'll submit to the record, but not people on the left calling them out for what they're doing and saying being a lie about Social Security. So you're pointing out a pattern. First, they tell terrible lies to try to whip up public sentiment against entities created in a bipartisan way, by the way, using congressional powers, approving spending, approving programs, approving agencies. Let's create incredible lies, magnify them on social media, try to spread them with our influencers and everybody. So now people believe that somehow, oh, the president talked about all this money going to transgender mice. That's a lie. But we're going to use that as an excuse to attack scientific funding. We're going to use that as an excuse to attack Medicaid. We're going to use that excuse to pull the people fighting Ebola out of East Africa. And so I was told by a colleague of mine, a Republican colleague of mine, when you come here, don't try to get into the head of your colleague and understand what their motivations are. But this, to me, is a pattern in which they're trying to undermine public confidence. And the result of this pattern has seniors, letter after letter I wrote, using things like, I'm losing sleep, I'm terrified, I'm scared, help me please, telling the most painful stories about retirement insecurity, about health challenges. And so again, I have this expectation, whether you're a Republican or a Democratic president, you don't insinuate fear amongst vulnerable communities. You don't insinuate fear amongst our elders who deserve our respect and deserve to retire with dignity. You don't do that. You stand boldly in front of them and say, you know what? There are some things we're going to improve. We're going to try to bring the best minds in America to make the best customer service, because every independent group has been saying that customer service is failing. And yeah, we want to go after fraud and abuse, but we're not going to do it. First thing we're going to do is fire the inspector generals who have a better record than Elon Musk has over this last decade in rooting out fraud and abuse under Democrat and Republican presidents. So it just doesn't add up. It's not on the level. And so before I allow you to ask the next question, what does this amount to, Senator Murphy? Ultimately, what this amounts to is an attack on the programs, the health care, the services, the retirement security that millions of Americans rely on. And often for them, what they're relying on is the difference between safety and security and chaos and destitution. I'm not exaggerating that. When somebody's Social Security check is the only income they have, and they've already downsized, as you said, brought in roommates, doing everything they can cut costs, because under this president, costs are going up. This is why we have to stand and not let this happen. Yes, I will yield for a question while retaining the floor.
So there's also a third agenda here. We were not necessarily both here at this time, but a few Republican administrations ago, there was an attempt to privatize Social Security, to take the corpus and move that money into the hands of the private sector for them to manage the money and, of course, charge a fee or a commission for the management of the money. The Social Security Trust Fund, if sort of fully handed over to investors on Wall Street, could make a lot of money for that industry. The American people rose up against that. It was stopped in its tracks, but that is still a priority for a lot of allies of the president to get their hands on that money inside Social Security. And again, I'm previewing a future conversation, but I keep on making the analogy to what is happening inside of the education space, because those same industries, whether it be investment banks or private equity firms, get wide-eyed at our public education dollars as well, because they would love to get their hands on those public education dollars and have private equity companies running our elementary schools and middle schools and high schools and skimming a little bit of money off the top to pay back their investors. And so, the other potential agenda here is to attack the public administration of Social Security, attack the public administration of our public schools in order to shift that administration and the oversight of the investments in the case of Social Security to the private sector, so that the president can hand those functions and that oversight to friends in the private sector. And once again, it just becomes a money-making vehicle for folks who already are doing very well, instead of an exercise in just trying to promote good governance, instead of the agenda simply being the education of our kids or the administration of a benefit program. It just becomes about making somebody else money. I pose that as a question to my friend, because we saw this attempt to try to privatize Social Security, and you can certainly see at the end of this assault, this false assault on the inefficiency of the public administration, the solution being to turn the program over to the private sector, the privatization of Social Security that many Republicans have wanted for a long time, finally coming to fruition.
That's the problem, right? Is that if you have an idea, bring it. Let's have a national debate. Let's bring in experts. Let's have a debate. The person you're talking about, Bush, who had that idea, he had the good sense to say, you know what? I'm not going to try to kill the agency. I'm not going to lay off thousands of their employees. I'm not going to drive the services it provides, make them worse, to be called out by right-leaning newspapers and right-leaning writers. I'm actually going to bring my idea forward, and let's have the debate in Congress. Let's bring people together. Let's hold the hearings. Let's have the conversation. I can deal with that, because this is going to surprise you, Senator Murphy, is I've had conclusions about policy positions that I've changed over the years. When I had a debate, I had a contest of ideas, people have persuaded me. But that's not the way Trump operates. He tried to kill health care without a plan. The powerful letter I read by John McCain about why he voted no is because it was first, kill this thing that people rely on. Don't worry, trust me, we'll figure it out later. That's what's happening with Medicaid right now. There's no conversation about how to better provide health care to the tens of millions of people that rely on Medicaid, from our seniors to expectant mothers to people with disabilities. No conversation. They're just sending people into dark rooms and saying, here's $880 billion I need, find a way to cut it, let's kill it, and then see what happens.
Ready, fire, aim.
Ready, fire, aim. Look, we are Senator Murphy, I prepared for so many days on this, and we're talking about the point, so I'm going to submit, there's lots of articles here that I'm going to submit to the record without objection from the presiding officer. I'd like to submit Washington Post article about long waits, waves of calls, website crashes, Social Security is breaking down. May I submit this for the record?
Without objection.
Thank you to the presiding officer and my friend who I'm keeping up at 3 a.m. He's a kind, generous man to be here. Here's a closure of Social Security offices. 47 closures across the country in red states and blue states, everywhere between. Closures of Social Security offices. I know everybody's talking about cutting Social Security, but what they're doing right now, is grinding the services of Social Security, grinding them down. So with the permission of I'd like to submit an article for the record from the Associated Press, a list of Social Security offices across the U.S. expected to close this year. Thank you very much. I want to read some of the places. Alabama, 634. This is without the rest of the language I just put in the record, but just for folks out there that are watching, these are the places, Social Security offices, provide really important services to your community that this administration, Elon Musk, are closing. Alabama, 634 Broad Street. Arkansas, 965 Holiday Drive, Forest City. 483 Jefferson Avenue in Texarkana. In the great state of Colorado, they're closing 825 North Crest Drive, Grand Junction. In Florida, they're closing 4740 Dairy Road in Melbourne. In Georgia, they're closing 1338 Broadway, Columbus. In Kentucky, they're closing 825 High Street in Hazard. In Louisiana, they're closing 178 Civic Center Drive, Houma. In Mississippi, there's 3 places they're closing. 4717 26th Street, Meridian, to the great people that live there. 604 Yalabusha Street in Greenwood. 2383 Sunset Drive in Grenada, Mississippi. In Montana, they're closing 3701 American Way. They're closing Social Security offices in North Carolina, 730 Roanoke Avenue, Roanoke Rapids. They're closing 2123 Lakeside Drive in Franklin, North Carolina. They're closing 2805 Charles Boulevard in Greenville, North Carolina. I know that town. They're closing 1865 West City Drive in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. In North Dakota, they're closing 1414 20th Avenue, Southwest, forgive me, the great people that live in this community, but Minot, I'm pronouncing, and I'm sure I'm butchering it. In Nevada, where my mom lives, in the city my mom lives, they're closing 701 Bridger Avenue, Las Vegas. In New York, 75 South Broadway, White Plains. My mom worked there. And 332 Main Street in Poughkeepsie, New York. In Ohio, 30 North Diamond Street, Mansfield. In Oklahoma, 1610 Southwest Lee Boulevard. In Texas, they're closing 2 offices, 1122 North University Drive. I know the people are going to write me letters and I'm mispronouncing their towns' names. Nacogdoches? Anybody from Texas here? No? I'm sorry. 8208 Northeast Zach Lentz Parkway. In West Virginia, they're closing 1103 George Costas Drive. In Wyoming, they're closing 79 Winston Drive, Rock Springs, Wyoming. Their cuts to Social Security staff, how deeply are they cutting? They're cutting thousands. We've already talked about it, but if I can, from the Associated Press, can I enter this article? Social Security Administration could cut up to 50% of its workforce.
Without objection.
Thank you. The article that I won't read, out of generosity to my dear friend who's presiding, but it details in painful ways what these cuts could mean to people in our country. Just trying to move a little quicker through my documents because I'm way behind. The impact of these cuts, one of the big places they're going to impact is in rural America, is already suffering so much. There's a lot of sources that are talking about the rural areas of our nation are they going to cut. And I'd like to enter the record another Associated Press article entitled "New Social Security Rules Present Barriers to Rural Communities Without Internet and Transportation, a new requirement that the Social Security recipients go online or in person to a field office to access key benefits instead of just making a phone call will be difficult for many people to meet in those rural areas." This is an article from March 22nd. Can I enter that into the record?
Without objection.
Thank you very much to the kind friend who's up with me late, or early, I should say. One more article I want to read, I want to ask for the record. I feel like I could take liberties with the presiding officer because I've known him for like 20 plus years. Consider him a real friend. He married up, and he's going to teach me how to do that. I guess I'm not allowed to insult a colleague on this. That's a violation of Rule 19, I think, but it was a joke. But you did marry up. You know that. Okay. So this is a former Social Security officers who are speaking out about what's happening. People that have worked in the agency see what's happening. Two former senior officials at the Social Security Administration, one under a Democratic president, one under a Republican president, wrote this column published in The Hill. The title of the column is "Social Security Faces a Crisis with Staff Cuts, Closures." Again, these are folks from both sides of the aisle yelling into the wilderness, hoping that more people will understand what is happening to Social Security, what these cuts in staff are actually going to do to the quality of life of millions of Americans who rely on Social Security, disproportionately impacting people who are living in rural areas, red states, blue states, Republicans, Democrats. This is not a normal time, America. That a bedrock commitment made is being undermined by the most powerful man in our country and the richest man in the world. And the title of the article, "Social Security Faces a Crisis with Staff Cuts and Closures," written by, again, somebody who worked under a Republican, somebody who worked under a president. May I enter this to the record?
Objection.
And I want to end with what I've been trying to do since I started I think about 8 hours ago. Yeah, 8 hours ago I began. I want to begin by doing what I said I was going to do, is not just lift my voice, but lift the voice of New Jerseyans and Americans. And so here's some words. This is one employee from New Jersey who contacted me to say that the teleservice center has received many calls from the public from New Jersey to Georgia and other states. They all have in common is the fear of losing their livelihood as a result of identification, verification, in-person visits. Seniors, disabled, and others that are economically disadvantaged need a voice, Senator Booker. And the voice I hear all throughout the day from seniors are voices of fear. Please review any policy of in-person identification for the public. Person from my state begging, because they're hearing the fear of the seniors that they've pledged themselves to serve. Another Social Security employee from New Jersey who contacted me said, I quote, "I worked at Social Security for almost 19 years. I was approaching my 19 years in July. However, I took the early out retirement because there's a lot of uncertainty within the agency. The resignation of others also brings additional phone calls and workloads into the office. This adds additional stress and no additional bodies to handle the workloads. It also provides poor, unfair service to the public." Here's another story from a Social Security employee in New Jersey. "I am a claims representative for our Social Security field office. The most dramatic changes I've noticed from our field office, the most dramatic changes I've noticed from our recent change in operations is that our appointment calendar seems to be filling up more quickly for simple post-entitlement changes that were formerly handled over the phone. This occupies appointment space for most urgent and critical issues that would warrant an office visit. We have identity verification protocols already in place to keep identity thieves in check. To the extent that some fraudsters are still getting through, requiring people to come into our office to verify their identities is an obviously less efficient solution to the problem. A better solution to enhance security question protocols is to use two-step verification systems and document fraud attempts in our technician experience dashboard so scammers can't just shop around for field offices to fool. Regarding the in-person identifying policy, I believe that it is causing more harm than good. I've had claimants appearing in person, frantic that they will lose their benefits because of this. My office has lost 4 staff members, 2 who are members of management. This is nothing but chaos here. And I can foresee more loss and a further decline in employee morale. That's from a Social Security employee in my state, describing what's going on in their office. Another New Jersey Social Security worker. I work in one of the smaller offices in New Jersey, and we are currently combined with another office that is undergoing renovations, which has caused the number of claimants coming into the office to double over the last few months. And although we do have extra staff, because the staff have been deployed to our location, it doesn't change the infrastructure of the building, such as the number of desks available to do in-person interviews and provide adequate waiting space for double the amount of claimants. In our office, we only have 9 desks where we can interview the public due to safety and safety protocols. 3 of these are front windows where we can do quick changes, and 6 of them are where we could do short interviews or benefit applications. Right now, being that most interviews are being done over the phone, we have over 20 people interviewing at a time now. Imagine having to do these interviews in person. We can only have 6 to 9 interviews at a time instead of 20 plus because there's only 6 by 9 desks available. This doesn't seem very efficient. Maybe they should. Too bad they can't call the Department of Government Efficiency, who caused the problem. Here's another Social Security worker, their story. The foot traffic in the field office on a daily basis is already overwhelming. The public coming in randomly to show their identity would be a disadvantage for the elderly, people with vision issues, disabled, and someone with no car. This really hits home with me. My older brother lost his right leg to diabetes, is legally blind and unable to drive. He called me concerned about this, knowing there is no way he can get to his field office and cannot afford to lose his retirement. I'm hoping this is reconsidered. Social Security is not a program, it's a promise. We owe it to seniors and working people who've paid into the Social Security their whole lives to make good on the promise of a secure retirement. Not to attack Social Security, to drive them into fear and worry, and when they call for help, to put them on hold for hours, or drive them into offices that may be closing or are overcrowded or are unable to help our elders. Does this sound like America at its best? Does this sound like America being made great again? This is outrageous. These are our elders. They deserve dignity, respect, and they deserve their Social Security. I'm going to move on to the next item, but I want to reiterate again, I'm determined to stand here as long as I physically can. We're 8 hours into it. Dozens and dozens of people, I've read their stories. As I've gone around the country, I've gone around my state, there's this growing anger and rage and fear. There's chaos, there's confusion. And they read the newspapers and see that programs are helping them when an unexpected disease or cancer or crisis hits them. And they see that a bunch of folks are trying to figure out how to cut $880 billion from things like Medicaid. The stories got me a little emotional just because hearing about so many people who, not to their fault, not to their problem, were hit by a crisis, a challenge, an accident at work. Are now sitting back and are going to see what we do. People have told us that their whole delicate, fragile world works because they have a transportation program that could be on the blocks of cuts in Medicaid, or that their home health care worker or that there are medications. And even while these big issues are being discussed, we're seeing, as we've been documenting here, again, from Republicans and Democrats, how the administration is already taking steps to roll back programs, to seize funding that people have been used to access the ACA or to lower their prescription drug costs, or that are funding their research that we're competing with China through the NIH. Republicans and Democrats we've read already who have been saying, hey, wait a minute, you shouldn't cut the things that actually produce money for your country in the long term. But now here's something that I want to get into, which is education in our nation. I believe that genius is equally distributed in the United States. There's as many geniuses being born in the wealthiest parts of New Jersey and Pennsylvania as are being born in the lowest incomes. And in the global knowledge-based economy, the most valuable natural resource any nation has is the genius of its children. One genius, one Einstein, one Madame Curie, one genius could change humanity forever. And I hear these stories about China graduating more people in STEM than we have total graduates in our entire country. It's a global competition. And if we are to be this nation that Andy Kim talked about, where every generation has the right as an American to expect that the next generation will do better, not worse, so much of this revolves around what we all know, how important education is to a democracy, especially. The best ideas, the best innovations, the best artists, innovators, entrepreneurs, scientists, doctors, teachers. We need to invest in the best pipeline possible. But now, not with Congress, who established the Department of Education, but by executive fiat, undermining the separation of powers, the administration wants to dismantle, defund, destroy the Department of Education and scatter its responsibilities across agencies that themselves are going through massive personnel cuts and are not equipped to handle them. This is ultimately about whether or not we as a nation believe that every child deserves an education, and we should organize ourselves to meet that calling. Our nation's children are that precious resource. One of the most noble professions are those people that teach our children. And so let's go right into it. At the signing ceremony, to commemorate the establishment of the Department of Education, President Jimmy Carter said, "Today's signing fulfills a long-standing personal commitment on my part. My first public office was as a county school board member. As a state senator and governor, I devoted much of my time to education issues. I remain convinced that education is one of the most noble enterprises a person or a society can undertake." Pastor Carter also said the Department of Education was created because education is so important to our nation's future that it must have a robust level of national support. Now, here's a letter that I really wanted to read. I'm a member of a Baptist church with the great Pastor Jefferson, but I actually study Torah. And in my Torah study with Rabbi Davidson, when I heard about all these cuts to the Department of Education, he wanted me to hear from the great Rebbe, Rebbe Menachem Schneerson, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who in 1979 wrote a letter not in support of religious schools, but wrote a letter in support of public education, in support of the creation of a special Department of Education. He wrote this letter in 1979. I was so moved by it. Thank you, Rabbi Davidson. I want to read it here. This is the Rebbe. "I am certain that you will agree that the state of education in this country, as in many others, leaves much to be desired." He was not happy. "And the status quo, as reflected in juvenile delinquency, etc., is far from satisfactory, and what's worse, has been steadily eroding, and that some determined nationwide effort is called for us to upgrade the quality of public education in this resourceful country. I trust you will agree that such an enormous effort, which is surely in the highest national interest, can come only from the federal government with the fullest cooperation of state, county, and city. In my view, a separate, adequately funded cabinet-level Department of Education subject to legislative safeguards to ensure that the traditional primacy of the states and localities in education affairs would not be jeopardized could well meet the challenge. The main reason why I support